I made sure I was original. Hi.
Well, little Nell said she couldn't compete with this, so she dropped out.
Thank God for that. Hello, darlings. So, what do you want to know?
First of all, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, yes.
How did you get involved with Lords of Salem? How were you approached for that?
A direct offer from Hollywood. That's how. Rob Zombie's a Rocky Horror fan, I didn't know. And I met Rob Zombie 15 years ago in London, but I didn't know who it was. And he was there with I met two American guys who wanted to cast a horror movie. And they specifically wanted to see Richard O'Brien, Patricia Quinn, and Christopher Lee. So the casting director, Jeremy Zinnemann, took me to meet these guys, but I didn't know who they were, and I don't know who they were. I don't know their names. And so they were casting a film, and then we all went to the Groucho Club, and we had dinner, and then I never heard from these fellows ever again. Until 15 years later, a call comes to my agent from LA saying, Rob Zombie is directing Lords of Salem and would like Patricia Quinn to play Megan. And I said, who's Rob Zombie? And every goth in town and everyone under 30 knew who he was. So they said, and he's White Zombie and you've got to do it and you must do it and you've got to be in it. I said, what's White Zombie? So then in came A House of a Thousand Corpses on the DVD, on the CD players, White Zombie, and I said, could you turn that thing down? And they said, it's Rob Zombie. I said, keep it on. It's great. It's great. Oh, heavy metal. Anyway, so then I arrive on the set of Lords of Salem in LA, and I meet Mr. Zombie, and I said to him, suddenly it was on the internet, it was rumoured that he and I had dinner 10 years ago in London. So I was with him on the set, and I said, everyone's saying that we had dinner 10 years ago in London. And he said, well, we did, Pat. I said, could you give me a clue? He said, well, my hair was much darker then. I thought, oh. Like a girl would say I was blonde and not red then, you know. And I thought, I still didn't know who you are. So I said, and he said, well, I was casting a film, and I said, are you the Crow Man? He said, yes. I said, you? What happened to you? Because he was doing a remake of The Crow, but he never made it. So I didn't get to be in it, so that's why I never heard from him again. About 15, it wasn't 10 years, it was 15 years ago. And I said to his wife, Sherry Zombie, I said, your husband and I had dinner 10 years ago in London, and they've been married, I think, 18 or 20 years, and I said to her, we had dinner, and she said, what? I thought, oh dear, what have I done now? She said, he never told me. And I thought, oh God. And he thought, I wonder why not. Sorry, a bit odd. Anyway, and then he brought in the photograph of him and me outside the Groucho Club, me in my fake white fur coat, and him doing that with his darker hair, and me looking at him as if I'm quite in love with him. That was after dinner and a couple of glasses of wine. And it was amazing, because there's the picture of him and me 15 years before, and him and me now. I love Rob Zombie because he's constant. Not many of those around. Anything else?
Any questions about the film? About Rocky Horror? Anyone want to know anything
that
specific? Yes?
When you first made Rocky Horror, did you think that it would have the success that it has now and has been going on for years. And
No, I love it. I've just been in Toronto, and it's in Ontario, and the Toronto cast came in on a bus, the shadow cast. They were brilliant, actually. And I opened the film, and the first girl said in question and answer, she said, Miss Quinn, I want to ask you, it's a random question, and Miss Quinn said, I don't do random, next. And so, this question you've just asked me, do you know how many times I've been asked? And the answer to it is, of course I knew. I mean, it was wonderful. When we first did this in New York, when we first heard what was happening, the dressing up as you, the talking to your film, it's unheard of. I mean, it's just before sound, you know. And then we were like out in Long Island, sitting in a cafe, waiting to go into some little tiny cinema, because it was just creeping around the place, a bit like Lords of Salem at the moment. And we arrived in and we had to sit in a cafe and wait till they were ready for us, Richard and Nell and myself and who else? That was it, I think. And it was amazing, this little town, and this woman said, oh, Frank, he's my son, I make his costume. And she said, and he gets arrested every weekend, but we get him out. I thought, really? Because this is all new to us, we don't know anything about this. So we had question and answer. They said, so Miss Quinn, did you make the film so slow so we could talk to it? I said, of course we did.
So, come on, you have to tell us something about Rocky Horror that someone hasn't asked you, some little tidbit, some little disgusting piece of information that they might want to know about the film that you haven't told anyone else.
I really have only just met you, and I don't know why you should ask me about something disgusting. Disgusting, I'm sorry. How gross.
We want to know the dirt.
Well, dirt off, I haven't got any.
Well, then anyone else got anything? There we go.
Yeah. Do you run into Tim Curry often?
No.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Your performance in I, Claudia stood out to me before I even knew Rocky Horror. Do you have any memories of the production of that series?
Yeah, it was stunning. Well, first of all, it's based on Robert Graves' book, and the script writer, Jack Pullman, was quite ingenious. Because people were talking about that the other day. I was speaking with a writer in LA last week, and he was saying Robert Graves' book is quite hard to read. Not that any of us read it. Even John Hurt. I mean, John Hurt doesn't read anything anyway. But it was in the rehearsal rooms. Robert Graves' book was everywhere, but we didn't pick it up. We just learned the lines. Jack Pullman was the script writer for I, Claudius, and he was ingenious, and why it's so good is his script. And his script is a soap opera in Rome, you know? So it made it so accessible to the public. I mean, Sean Phillips, all done in studios in the BBC, and Sean Phillips is there saying, wait till my husband gets home, you know, to the rabble, you know. And we're in the Colosseum in a studio, and I'm saying, kill him, you know, with the lions. There weren't any lions. It was good acting. Brilliant costumes, and the BBC in those dramas at that time was fantastic. And sadly, they can no longer make them, afford to do them, and all they make, if at all, is a really bad Jane Austen once a year.
Go ahead.
I also love shock treatment. Do you guys anyone say about shock treatment? You know, you like shock treatment?
Shock treatment. Yeah. Shock treatment. Well, shock treatment was a gas, but the sad thing was that we were actually. They did a recce in Texas and things, and Sue Blaine, everyone was there, the costume people, and we were going to make it in the States, shock treatment, and that was quite exciting. And But then there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, and nobody could work. Hollywood was on strike, so nobody could go to work. So we couldn't go to the States to work. And we ended up in Wembley Studios, not to decry Wembley Studios, but it isn't quite Texas, you know. And so a lot of things had to be tinkered with because it was in a small studio. Well, I didn't know what it was really about. And Barry Humphries, who's Dame Edna, said to me during the film, he said, "Do you know what this is about, Pat?" And I said, "No." But it was fun, and the music's good, you know. And then it was amazing, because then Richard O'Brien phoned me up after the Truman Show came out, and he said, "They've stolen my bloody plot." That's what it was about, but it was so ahead of its time, you know. So the Truman Show is inside a soap opera. The guy's born in it, brought up in it. Anybody seen it?
Yeah.
Carrie? Yeah. And so that was amazing. You see, I didn't get it. I mean, you know, we're locked into a game show. So, you know, they live in it. They live in the game show. The audience doesn't go home. They sleep there. They wake up. You know, so it was quite an extraordinary idea, really, that O'Brien had. But there was no sex in it. Is that dirty enough for you?
Perfect. Just what I was waiting for. Go ahead.
So speaking of dirty things, it did have a bit of incest going on with Cosmo and Nation, sort of like with Rick Rack and Magenta, and I was watching it thinking, what's up with that? So was that a little weird, thinking that Richard O'Brien had to play your brother and you were, you know?
Or did you even think about that at the time?
It's like she didn't even know.
I didn't know. That's what's gorgeous about it. Because the thing is, I did a question and answer once in London, and someone said, you know, Miss Quinn, what do you think about incest? And I said, what is incest? And they said, about 11 years. The whole thing is this, things changed. On stage, when we were rehearsing for the play, the show on stage, Richard and I were told by the director to find a sign, something, to show that we were up to some no good, something between us. So Richard, being the clever boy he is, came up with the elbow. And we did that on stage, so when people weren't looking, we just did a ching. So it could have been a nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Just adds to the...
Could you keep doing that every, 3 minutes? Could you tell people to ring him all the time? Amazing. That works. Okay, so anyway, so we get to the film, and when we're throwing candles down the lift, whatever we're doing, Jim Sharman shouted, because it was in silence, so he could shout out directions, and he shouted, you know, bite her on the neck. And I thought, oh, that's new. It was an accident, another accident. So there's that. So since that, then incest came up. So it's on the commentary, you know, because I said to Richard O'Brien, you know, that there's nothing to do with incest in Rocky Horror. It was never there, it was nothing. And it's, you know, the fans then shouted elbow copulation or anything else. You know, they made that up because of the ch. That's when they thought, oops. And it was just, that wasn't, anyway. So Richard said, I said, there was nothing ever written about that or anything. And he said, I said, if there was, I certainly didn't know. And he said, no, that's what made it so good, Pat, you didn't know. So when we got to shock treatment, it seemed quite normal that he was in my bed. But he was making, no, he was needles and pins. He was sewing little frocks. So he's a bit of an odd brother. You know, the sewing machine. And I was smoking a ghoul. It just looked good, you know what I mean? Don't know what the hell it was about. That was fun.
Yes, in the back there.
Where did you get the name Magenta from?
That's the name of the character.
So I mean, it was in the script right from the beginning. That's what I think he means. Yeah. So when they wrote it, they wrote the character Magenta right from there.
I know, because I've always wondered about Columbia. What is that? Seriously, does anybody know?
Columbia Pictures, maybe?
No.
The girlfriend that does have short red hair. The girl in the logo for Columbia Pictures has the short red hair, so that's a good theory.
Does she?
The woman holding the torch.
Oh. I didn't add that up. Got it. I'll ask Richard one day.
Anybody else?
Oh, we finished.
Yes.
Yeah. So with shock treatment, you guys made shock treatment, then it came out, and it wasn't. Were you upset that it didn't do as well as Rocky Horror? Or?
Yeah, we were used to that because Rocky Horror didn't do well either. Rocky Horror is what they called a sleeper, till somebody had the brilliant idea at 20th Century Fox to market it on the campuses across America and put it on at midnight. What a clever boy he was. And then it drew a strange crowd.
And it keeps getting stranger.
Oh.
Do they still do the midnight shows?
Yes.
Are they still real popular?
Yes.
Wow. Because I had a friend of mine owned a theater. A friend of mine owned a theater. I recommended Rocky Horror be put in there, and the friend said, "No, you don't want to do that because of what goes on." I never saw the show. I had no idea. He booked a show in there, and well, I have
It's messy.
and it is messy. He said it cost about $400 to clean the theater.
I know, but
What
they
happened?
got it right in Milan. In Milan, they have a cinema called the Cinema Mexico, and being Italy, it's all tiled, which is perfect. So the floor's tiled and everything. It's so gorgeous because our names are written all over the foyer, and it's gorgeous. And the Italians love Rocky Horror. It's really such a gas. I mean, Rocky Horror has been amazing to me. I've travelled the world with Rocky Horror. And when the DVD came out, when 20th Century's got to sell something, they pull us out of the attic, you know. Aren't they lucky? Anyway, and so I just want to say that 20th Century sent me around the world to promote the DVD. So I had a great Milan experience. And in fact, it was extraordinary because Rocky Horror was touring the whole of Europe. So it was in Milan when I was there. And it was extraordinary that night. Because wherever it is, it's like joining the circus. I can go in and sing science fiction. I don't interfere with the production because I can go in at the beginning. I sort of feel like Maria Callas, actually. I just drop in, sing my aria, and leave with a bouquet. Do you know? It's quite nice. So I don't have to be in the play. So the great thing was that science fiction's at the beginning, and she goes, right? So I go into the National Theatre of Milan in the square of Magenta, which was a battle. In France they have the Boulevard of Magenta. In Italy they have Magenta streets, and so it was a battle with the French and Italians. I'm not quite sure of the history of the battle, but the streets are named that in Italy and France. And the square of Magenta has the Scala there, where Maria Callas did sing, and the National Theatre of Milan here, across the square. So they're the posh people, and they're the poor people. I don't mean that, the common, the riffraff. And it's wonderful, because it's like if any of you saw Amadeus, It's like Mozart was there, and down the road was Simon Callow running the Variety Theatre. I thought, isn't this astonishing that here I am doing this? It was wonderful. Anyway.
During the production, was there any ad-libbing? Was there any stuff made up during the, or was it pretty much sticking to the script?
No, as far as we were concerned, we were in Chekhov. There was nothing camp about Rocky Horror. People made it camp. No, we were very serious about what we were doing.
So it stuck pretty much to the script, as far as
totally,
was there,
for whatever
totally
script there was, really. Yeah, totally. I mean, you can't interfere with O'Brien's lines. They're brilliant. Why would you muck around with that? Now, Mr. Zombie is a slightly different matter, but don't tell him I said that. Who said that?
Were there any other ideas for sequels that either you had or that were bandied about among the crew in talking about possibilities for where to go from here? You know, like perhaps visiting transsexual Transylvania, or they go off on another mission, or you think it's a work that's done in...
Well,
now.
no, there was a thing called, I think it was called The Old Queen, which I think is a ghastly title for anything. And then it was meant to be another idea that Frank went back to Denton and Janet was having his baby. And I thought, oh God, not babies. Like, horrible. I mean, I thought that was an awful idea. Anyway, and then there was bandied about this sequel. And then I read, and somebody wrote to me, or told me, that Richard O'Brien had said in a magazine that he killed me off in a magazine. I thought, but I'm not dead, because I went back to Transylvania, did I not? I think he just wanted rid of everyone just to star in it himself.
Go ahead.
Can you still do the time warp?
No. Or it'll cost you. But I have a great story. My nephew is Snow Patrol, the drummer in the band Snow Patrol, Johnny Quinn. And his brother was getting married in Dingle. In fact, Amy Winehouse sang in Dingle quite a lot, don't know why. But in Dingle in Ireland. And Johnny Quinn, my nephew, from the very highly successful band Snow Patrol, said, Auntie Pat, would you sing the Time Warp at the wedding? I said, oh, Jonathan, sorry, do I have to? He said, we're bringing a band in from Belfast for Snow Patrol to sing, you know, and they sing, light up, and chasing cars, and whatever they sing. Anybody know Snow Patrol? Well, that's good. Anyway, and so band came in from Belfast and they played for Snow Patrol, and they got up and did their Snow Patrol. And then everyone was out, you know, off to the champagne and Jonathan said, you're on now, Pat? I said, oh, Jonathan, do I have to do this? Nobody's in the building. They're all out looking at the sea and wandering about. And he said, they'll come in. I said, oh, God. So, you know, how does it begin?
It's astounding.
Well, that'll do, darling. So, how does the music begin? Din, din, din. How's it go? Okay, yeah, that started. So suddenly, so we've got the vicar and the priest or whatever, we've got the flower girls, we've got the, my parents, yeah, that, and they all came in, and Snow Patrol comes in, everyone was in, and I had to do all of it, because nobody knew except me. Well, by that time, I really don't need to do this. Anyway, so... okay. And so I was up doing that. I remember! You know? And so with the band. And everyone was dancing. It's extraordinary. So we've got 5-year-old girls, we've got grandmas, and we've got Snow Patrol all going, Hard stay time warp, you know. And I thought, this is power. And my son said to me, who's grown up with Rocky Horror, I mean, he's Rocky Horrored out, as you can imagine, you know, since he was 5. And, but he's quite proud of it, really. And he said after that evening, he said, Mother, he said, you were great. He said, Snow Patrol. It was lovely.
Okay, anybody else? We're gonna, sure.
You were in a story of Doctor Who in 1989, Dragonfire.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us anything about that? What was that like? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Well, every actress wants to do Doctor Who, and I thought I might be, you know, the marvelous villainess, but I was sort of in a white police uniform with a kind of helmet, you know, which is very depressing. And I came from Iceworld, and also one has one's favourite doctors, you know, and your age is given away by your doctors, and who you hid behind the settee from, you know. That's the way it works. And Sylvester McCoy, whom I adore, and he's a brilliant and marvellously talented actor, but he's not my doctor. And he was my doctor. But apart from that, and it was the worst bloody dragon you ever saw. I never saw an effect like it. Anyway.
Who was your doctor? Who was your favorite doctor?
I like Patrick Troughton and Pertwee and everyone before Tom Baker. Shut my mouth and struck me dumb. Love you, Tom.
Anybody? You're all done? There's no more questions? That's amazing.
I think that's astounding. And time is fleeting.
Okay, thank you
and we
very much.
must go and enjoy. Woo-hoo! Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I made sure I was original. Hi.
Now, Little Nell said she couldn't compete with this, so she dropped out.
Thank God for that. Hello, darlings. So, what do you want to know?
First of all, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, yes.
How did you get involved with Lords of Salem? How were you approached?
It took me to meet these guys, but I didn't know who they were, and I don't know who they were. I don't know their names. And so they were casting a film, and then we all went to the Groucho Club, and we had dinner, and then I never heard from these fellows ever again. Until 15 years later, a call comes to my agent from LA saying, Rob Zombie is directing Lords of Salem and would like Patricia Quinn to play Megan. And I said, who's Rob Zombie?
For that.
A direct offer from Hollywood. That's how. Rob Zombie's a Rocky Horror fan, I didn't know. And I met Rob Zombie 15 years ago in London, but I didn't know who it was. And he was there with I met 2 American guys who wanted to cast a horror movie. And they specifically wanted to see Richard O'Brien, Patricia Quinn, and Christopher Lee. So the casting director, Jeremy Zinnemann, anyway, so then I arrive on the set of Lords of Salem in LA, and I meet Mr. Zombie, and I said to him, suddenly it was on the internet, it was rumoured that he and I had dinner 10 years ago in London. So I was with him on the set, and I said, everyone's saying that we had dinner 10 years ago in London. And he said, well, we did, Pat. I said, could you give me a clue? He said, well, my hair was much darker. And every goth in town and everyone under 30 knew who he was. So they said, and he's White Zombie and you've got to do it and you must do it and you've got to be in it. I said, what's White Zombie? So then in came A House of 1,000 Corpses on the DVD, on the CD player's White Zombie, and I said, could you turn that thing down? And they said, it's Rob Zombie. I said, keep it on. It's great. It's great. Oh,